Hey podcaster, I'm Tim Wahlberg, your podcast performance coach with another actionable tip so you can grow your podcast authority, generate leads, and convert with ease. Today's tip is every story needs a job. One of the most common pieces of podcast advice you'll hear is tell more stories in your podcast. And I completely agree. Hell, I've given this advice. Check out episodes 234, How Tiny Stories Build Big Trust with Podcast Listeners, and episode 107, Why You Need More Stories in Your Podcast. Stories are memorable. They build trust. They help your listener understand what you're trying to teach, and they make your podcast a whole lot more interesting to listen to. But I think we've accidentally slipped over one really important part. Why are you telling that story in the first place? Now, if you've got an entertainment podcast, that's different. The story is the show. That's what your listeners came for. But if you're podcasting for your business, every story should be working for you. It should have a job. Maybe that job is helping someone understand a complicated idea. Maybe it's overcoming a limiting belief. Maybe it's helping your listener feel seen. Or maybe it's simply making your point more memorable. Whatever the job is, know what it is before you start telling the story. Because I think a lot of podcasters have it backwards. They sit down to record and think, okay, what story can I tell? Instead, I'd encourage you to start here. What do I want my listener to walk away with? What's the one thing you hope sticks after you've finished listening? Once you know that, then go looking for the story. Maybe it's something that happened to you. Maybe it happened to a client. Maybe it's something you read in a book or saw in a documentary. Maybe it's a story from history. Honestly, it doesn't really matter where the story comes from. What matters is that it's the best vehicle to deliver the lesson. Think of it this way. The lesson is the destination. The story is just the car. You wouldn't hop in your car and start driving without knowing where you're going. So don't start telling a story until you know where you're trying to take your listener. One of our clients loves to tell stories and could fill hours and hours of a podcast with them. We helped him hone in on the idea that any story in his podcast should serve the listener and that the story should have a role to play in the bigger picture of his podcast and business. He's a financial planner who is passionate about supporting retirees to live life to the fullest. One of his stories was about a couple who believed that they had to pinch their pennies in retirement. He was able to show them that they could afford to spend more than they were spending, specifically that they could still afford to travel, which was their happy place. Years later, the husband passed away, and his widow shared with our client that those trips had been their greatest joys in retirement, and they were so grateful to him for making that happen. Now, this story is doing a really good job of showcasing exactly what he does for people and how it impacts them. But here's the thing. He often gets verklempt when he tells this story. It chokes him up, and we told him not to hide that. Everyone's instinct is to try to sound professional, but we told him to be real here because there are two stories being told here. One, that he can help retirees live retirement to the fullest, and two, that he truly is passionate about the work he does. He told us that one of his new clients told him that that story was what motivated him to book a call because he could tell that he really cared about his clients. The story did its job. So remember this, the story might be about you or your clients, but it's really for your listener. Your listener doesn't care that you lost a client. They care because they've lost a client. They don't care that you were nervous before giving a presentation. They care because they've felt that same knot in their stomach. The details might be yours. The emotion belongs to them. When your listener recognizes themselves somewhere inside your story, that creates connection. That creates trust. And here's one last thing. Don't assume they'll figure out why you told it. Connect the dots. Tell them the reason. Tell them what changed. Tell them why that story matters. Because a great story without a takeaway is just a story. A great story with a clear takeaway becomes something your listener remembers. Better yet, it becomes something they can apply in their own life or business. It makes them think, and it makes them think about you. That's what you want. You want your podcast to be sticky. You want it to be memorable, and you want it to motivate them to take action. A great story with intention will do that every time. So, next time you're planning an episode, don't start by asking, what story can I tell? Instead ask, what do I want my listener to remember? Then go find the story that gets them there. Don't tell a story because you have one. Tell a story because your listener needs one. Tell a story because it makes your episode or idea easier for your listener to understand and take action on. And I hope that's just the tip you need. Storytelling is just one ingredient to a well-rounded podcast episode. And like a great recipe, if you miss one or two ingredients, your episode will turn out flat. If your episodes are falling flat and you're not sure why, let's examine your recipe and methods on a free podcast coaching call. Because when you get the right ingredients working together, your podcast stops falling flat and starts rising into something your audience can't wait to devour. Book your free podcast coaching call by using the link in the show notes or the big orange button at podcastperformancecoach.com. I'm Tim Wahlberg. See ya!